Hey everybody, if you're liking the CB vlog, go ahead, hit subscribe, tell a friend, post this on your Facebooks, and let everyone know about it. It'd be great. But yeah, let's get into this week's CB vlog topic.
This week we're talking about creature removal, mass versus spot. So we're going to weigh the pros and cons of each. We're going to talk about brewing behind them, what we look for in our mass removal and our spot removal, and why we run them. But first, what do we mean by mass removal? We're talking creature removal specifically, and we're talking any kind of spell that just kind of says destroy all creatures or exile. Basically, that just gets rid of all the creatures on the board, maybe with restrictions, maybe not. And then spot removal we're referring to cards that specifically point at one or two creatures, maybe three, and just say get rid of this specifically.
Yeah. So, I mean, very obviously, these are essential things you need in commander decks, and we're just going to be speaking about like the amounts, the numbers you want to have in your decks versus certain types of decks and things like that. But let's get right into it. Let's talk about mass removal right off the top here. Okay, everyone knows that we're talking wrath of God, things of that nature. You should have a couple of these in every commander deck, and luckily over the course of time, Wizards has printed these effects in just about all the colors. Even green has some creature mass removal in the form of stuff like Azuri's Predation and things like that. So definitely you want a couple. Now, the number at which you want is what is sort of up to you, obviously. In general, I hear people saying they want 5, 6, even like upwards of that 7, 8 wraths in their deck. But I know, Sean, you and I play a lot less than that. And
that sounds crazy to me.
Yeah, I know. Me too. And I get why, right? Like, why are we having wraths on the board? Well, we want to catch up. You're always going to be behind in a game of Commander. It will happen at some point or another. So it's good to have contingency plans for that. Obviously, hitting that reset button. There's obviously strengths to having more wraths versus less, but also like having a few less wraths than that number I think is ideal, personally. I think wraths tend to prolong games, and if you are experiencing in your meta the problem of games last really long, generally I think one of those reasons is that every time you hit the reset button, it resets the game, essentially, right? Obviously not with lands and things like that, but people have to build back out again, so that adds another development phase to every turn. And, different decks will want different numbers, obviously, but I think that's one of the negatives, and obviously one of the positives is that if you get a bad start, a slow start, your board's not there mid-game, and then everyone else's is, obviously you hit that Wrath of God, you hit that, whatever route or whatever, and then now you can, now you're in a position to actually start playing. So there's pros and cons, obviously.
I think, and another reason why I'm an advocate for 1 or 2 wraths per deck and not 5 or 6 wraths per deck is because that's not a fun meta for me to play in. Like, the decks that I like to play run 1 or 2 wraths, because if I'm running 5 or 6 and you're running 5 or 6, that's a wrath every other turn. So I might as well not make any moves for my main strategy until I can do it all at once. And I'm not inclined to brew decks that just ramp out and try to do everything all at once, so it can just sneak through, right? Like, I like to play politics. I like to build up. I like to work with people for a bit, stop working with people and make things happen. I don't mind if you see a little bit of what's coming. Mm-hmm. That's unavoidable. I'm not going to go that way. Just a couple. I mean, if you're running a creature strategy where you're based on creatures, you're going to want less wraths anyway, because you're only going to want to cast those wraths if something's going wrong. Like I said, like Andy said, if you got a bad start, maybe you wrath to and then start your game plan. But for the most part, you don't want to hit your own stuff while you're building it up. So a creature strategy, probably going to want less wraths. However, the opposite is true if you're in a spell strategy or a control strategy.
Yeah, you're going to want more, obviously, because controlling the board is generally keeping threats off of the board. Obviously, this is just classic Magic, 101. You want to, destroy everything. And in a multiplayer game, that means destroying multiple opponents' creatures instead of just the one, obviously. To go back just to the numbers of these things in your decks, I like to run between 3 and 4 usually. So it's like a bit more than Sean, but I'd say a bit less than like most other Commander players. And I find that's been a real happy medium for me. You can still deal with, board states that are outclassing yours at key times, but at the same time, and you can rely on draw to get you those once, not every single time, but someone has to win, right? So I'm okay with that. And it does allow in our meta, and I think that most of the players in our meta are around the same like deck level. Like we try to build to the same level of, tunedness and things like that. And the same level of board wrath, it seems like, because we're able to build board states slowly, play politics, and then, board wraths obviously still happen, but our games aren't going super, super long. And it's not just a matter where you have to do everything on one turn, like Sean was saying. That's a really good point, actually. I think that spikier metas have that because people are just running so many board wraths. You just need to be able to win on your turn. The idea of waiting for one of your creatures to untap is just like in competitive. Like just look at competitive EDH. Like those creatures are at a big disadvantage because of that. So it's one key to keeping it a bit more casual if that's what you're looking for in your Commander games.
Yeah, okay, so let's talk for a second about spot removal and like some general theories on that. So as we said, spot removal is the kind of spell that just targets one, maybe two creatures and just says, hey, this creature's gotta go right now. I also think this is a must-have in any brew. You must have some spot removal because sometimes you need to deal with a creature, but you do not want to destroy all creatures because you've got a lot of great stuff going on, right? Maybe there's only one opposing creature that's causing some problems. So you'll want to get rid of it. There will always be a situation where you would rather kill one creature than all the creatures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And as we know, the theory of card disadvantage versus card advantage, in multiplayer, your spot removal is going to be more often than not card disadvantage for you and your opponent, the opponent that you're hitting. Because in a 4-player game, I've spent, you have a card out, I've spent a card to get rid of it, and these other 2 players are now up a card technically because they spent nothing, and they get to just sit there and watch this play out. So that's why that's why in Commander mass removal is obviously way better when dealing with threats, but like Sean said, spot removal is still absolutely necessary. We just want it to be as efficient as possible, even in casual games, right? You want Swords to Plowshares over basically any other type of removal because 1 mana is exactly what you want. You can keep that up easier. Really, really important to keep that up. And something I didn't write down here, but I wanted to include with this is, and we're actually, we're going to talk about it with instant speed, so I'll just leave it for a second. Okay. But one thing, ideally, your spot removal can hit multiple permanents. That's why we like the versions that just say, destroy or exile a specific permanent, because then, it has the plus side of not only hitting creatures, but you can grab a pesky artifact or enchantment, which are notoriously difficult to get rid of. So obviously you want it to be the most utility possible.
Yeah, the best removal spell you could imagine is one that costs 1 mana, is instant speed, and it exiles a permanent. Like that is like the ceiling of. I mean, maybe we can invent 0 mana, but you lose maybe you get that you have to pay during your next upkeep. Let's not get crazy there, but but that comes down to like what your color pie can do. Like not all colors can destroy all permanents, right?
Right.
Very easily at a cheaply thing. Not all colors do things at instant speed as well as others. A lot of times you're going to pay sorcery speed. But so that's always, the flexibility always comes with a cost depending on the colors of your identity. So that's something you got to consider. But as always, Exile is going to be better than Destroy, and Instant is going to be better than Sorcery, obviously. And I would contest that Sorcery speed spot removal is unplayable.
Unplayable.
I'm gonna make that bold statement. Of course, you can come up with exceptions for weird commanders and specific interactions, but in general, I want to refer back to something Andy brought up about the card disadvantage. How when I do spot removal on a creature, I spent a card, you lose a creature, but our other opponents are not down a card, so they're actually up in this encounter. But my spot removal is to protect me. My spot removal is if you're like, hey, I'm going to come at you with my giant commander or my brutal attacking creature, I'm going to spot remove it with instant speed removal. I can't do that in combat if it's a sorcery card. And I'm hoping that I can get a little bit of secret card advantage by giving a message to the other players, like, don't attack me with important things because I'm packing spot removal and I will deal with it. So hopefully I'm getting extra card advantage sort of in an illusionary way by having them not come at me.
Yeah, the threat of activation or the threat of casting a spell.
Yeah.
Same thing as like the idea of when you're holding a counterspell and your opponents think you have a counterspell so they don't play anything into it. You're getting value that way as well.
Yeah, that works if you've shown them some pieces already.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I think when you're playing in spot removal, you keep it for you only, right?
Yep.
So if there's some massive creature on board, really only use it if it's causing problems for you. I mentioned before, I think in a previous episode, not that long ago, that was a big moment for me as a commander player, was learning that. Like, I used to think like, oh my God, that big threat's going to kill us all. I got to kill it right away. It's like, no, you have time. And specifically when they're instant speed removal spells, you have as much time as possible, right? Because you get to choose.
Okay.
So if he's about to suit that up with a Greaves or something, like,
yeah,
you have the opportunity to answer it.
So that's what it's going to bring up. So like, what would it take for someone at the table to convince you to use your instant speed removal on something that is not affecting you? How would you have to negotiate that? Is that even possible?
It's very tough. I need a lot. I really do, because that can be the difference between the game sometimes, right? That can be the difference between you getting killed by that thing later, or something similar rather later, versus saving one of your opponents that you want dead anyways. Like, they better give you a lot for that.
I kind of feel like, to me, that comes down to a situation where I'm in a state where I don't think I can beat that attacking player by myself.
Right.
Like, if I need that other player to like win, and then I'm like, I think I can take you later, but I need your help to take this player out. I think that's when I would do it.
Yeah, that makes sense. This brings up the question, though. What does a sorcery speed single removal spell look like that you will play? So I brought up in our discussion before we started, when we were making the notes for the vlog here, the card Sever the Bloodline. And I'll just pop it up on screen here and read it for the people listening. Sever the Bloodline is 3 and a black for a sorcery that says exile target creature and all other creatures with the same name as that creature, and it has flashback for 5 and 2 black. So 7, which is a lot, but flashback is pretty sweet. So we were talking about this card, and I've never cast this card in Commander. I have included it in a deck. I think only one deck, because I think I only have one copy of it. But I was like, okay, I think this might be enough. Now, and this was my thinking on it when I put it in a deck. I was like, this might be good enough to warrant it being sorcery speed. And I'm only thinking of it as exile target creature with flashback. That other thing of all other creatures with the same name as that creature is also notable, though. It's a pretty good bonus, obviously against tokens. And I there's a random case, I suppose, if two people are playing the same commander or some other big threat that two people have on board or something like that. But I think that's unlikely. I think more than likely you're just using this as a spot removal spell, and then flashing it back at some point later in the game. So
right.
So Sean, you said you're not looking to run this card. You don't think this is good enough.
No, I'm standing by my bold statement that sorcery speed spot removal is unplayable. And this is because so you always want to look about flexibility. Like, so I'm sure they could print a sorcery speed spot removal spell that is worth playing, but it would have to be extremely flexible, and this is not flexible enough, because the primary case I want to use my spot removal is if you're attacking me with like some sort of 11/11 thing that
with
like is
infect and indestructible, some sort of thing like that.
Yeah, who knows? Like, I mean, indestructible gets trickier also because then you can't destroy, then you have to exile. But there's definitely times when I'm just, or if you're just like,
but that's
hey,
one of the that's one of the pros of this card, right? That's one of the big things that makes this card better than a lot of single of instant speed removal for like this a similar cost, right? This exiles as opposed to destroy, and you don't need
it does.
You don't need white to do it.
I want to call up Hour of Glory. Can you pull up Hour of Glory? I'm always going to run Hour of Glory instead. It's an instant 4 mana that exiles target creature. There's a little bit of bonus text that would never come up in our format.
Yeah.
But like that's like I don't get to flash it back for. But again, sorcery speed 7 mana flashback is not worth it to me. I'm probably not going to spend a whole turn doing that. And also, I don't care if I'm getting like if we're the other bonus is getting a lot of tokens with the same name, but then that's what my mass removal's for.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah. Well,
so I think like, I'm always going to take Hour of Glory beforehand, and I won't have room for it.
I think you are right. I'm just going to say this. I think you're right about Sever the Bloodline. Just missing the bar, I think, for being truly playable. But I'm gonna like play devil's advocate and make a case for it in that.
Sure, okay.
In that this is a card that is like you're like, oh, I don't need that because that's what my mass removal's for. But this is a flexible version of this. This is mass removal for tokens. This exiles a big thing that's indestructible, and it does it even later in the game. Like if it's down to 1v1 and you've cast this card early to get rid of a threat, and now you're down 1v1 and someone slams a huge, they slam a Blightsteel or something, like now you have an answer. It's sitting there in your graveyard. Isn't that pretty good?
Yes, that is pretty good. And if someone ran this card in their deck, I would never judge them for it. But from my personal deck brewing style, you know what? And maybe if I'm mono black, like I don't have any mono black decks that come to mind, I don't think. So like maybe your removal package runs real deep. So this won't be the first card I run that is spot removal, but if I've got room for like 5 or 6, maybe this is my 5th or 6th one.
Yeah. So do you think this would get better with like if this cost 2, like if this was 1 and a black and then was like 5 for the flashback? Do you think you would consider running it then? Like, is it about the cost, or is it simply about the effect?
I mean, that cost does make it very appealing because I get it twice, and it seems doable, right? I can now spend 7 and do it all at once, like the first one and the flashback one. That seems reasonable too. Yeah, you're turning this into a reasonable card,
right?
I
So
think.
3 with so split the difference now. Is 3 even good enough? So is the 1 mana cost reduction good enough for you?
Oh, I don't know.
So yeah, so that's where it becomes a little bit like, ooh, I don't know. But 4 is definitely enough for you to say no to it.
But and to me, like I'm already like the times I want this the most are on your turn when you're coming at me with something,
Definitely.
or when you're about to like cast part 2 of a 2 creature combo. I want to be able to remove the first creature.
Definitely,
like there's so few opportunities where it's important to remove a creature on my turn. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely like missing instant speed is a major knock, right? Again, like for all the reasons we said, you want to hold it up just for you, and you'll only be able to tell that, when combat comes around or when there's a combo that's about to go off. So yes, I think you're right. I think there is a place for this in more casual metas. I think obviously you're not going to see this run in very many competitive, if any, competitive decks or any of the spikier metas that you see. You're probably not bringing this card to GPs and playing in commander pods and things like that, right? Even maybe at your LGS, you're probably not, maybe not running this card. That being said, we've included way worse cards in our decks for the show for budget reasons and things like that. So, but just interesting to talk about. Yeah. I it's in one of my decks. I think I can't remember. It's either in my vampires deck or it's in my like I had a mono black zombie deck that I was like really tinkering with for a long time. I think it's in that deck, and I like I said, I've never seen it, but I included it because I wanted to see if it was good enough, right? And I was hoping to draw it and see, and I never have. So, you know, the jury's out on this, but in general, I think you're absolutely right. Instant speed always for spot removal. Like, don't even really bother looking at sorcery speed. It needs like this. The fact that we're debating this card with all its bonuses is pretty indicative of the idea that like the sorcery speed is just still not, you know, it's not good enough. That's how bad a disadvantage that is.
Yeah. So let's segue this into like when you're brewing your deck, what kind of decisions do you make to put stuff in, right? So we're always going to weigh the cost and the flexibility, as we've talked about for spot removal. But what about mass removal? How important is sorcery versus instant for mass removal? Because you're always going to pay a lot more for instant speed mass removal than for sorcery. That's just how Magic works. Instant speed things generally cost more than sorcery speed, unless you reach way back to before they knew how to cost things.
Yeah. And then sometimes you just get things for free. It's very true. So, I mean, instant speed mass removal, a lot harder to come by, obviously. I mean, the only examples that spring to my mind are Route. Cyclonic Rift is a unique version, obviously, because it's even a one-sided wrath, which is very valuable. That's why that card is so good. Even though it just bounces to hand, we all know the value of Cyclonic Rift. And there's, I even looked it up earlier. Now I can't remember it again. But there's another white mass removal. It's like Fated Retribution.
Fated Retribution, yeah.
Nice. Fated Retribution is the other one. All of them at 7 mana. All of them. All 3 of them.
When we can, on budget, very easily pay 5 mana for a sorcery speed one.
Yes.
And Route, I think, will let you pay 5 to have it at sorcery
Absolutely,
speed.
yeah. Route is a 5 mana.
Example.
Yeah, and you can pay 2 more to make it instant. Route is Wrath of God. It has the text that they can't be regenerated as well, which is, I guess... Yeah. And I think Fated Retribution hits Planeswalkers, and if it's your turn, scry 2.
I think that makes it. I think that makes Route the best mass removal spell in terms of flexibility, because you get to have it instant if you want at the premium cost. But 5 mana for a destroy all creatures is fair. Like that's what I run in white. I run 5 mana destroy all creatures is a lot.
Yeah, and the upside is that you can cast it at instant speed, and like. Fumigate. The upside is that you'll gain a bunch of life, and so on, right? So these 5 mana wrath, they have this. Usually, will have this tacked on upside to them, and I think in Commander that's what we're looking for. I don't really ever specifically look for instant speed wrath. I think I got to say, like, I don't run. I have Route in one deck. Cyclonic Rift is a different story, obviously, but if we're talking just the traditional wrath, the destroy all creatures, I don't ever seek them out. I always am fine with running the sorcery speed versions of them. The only deck where I run Route is my Afara, like everything's at instant speed in that deck, right? It's all about flashing in creatures and counter spells, and so Route is very much at home there.
So and then your Afara is a bit of a control deck as well, right? Yeah. So you're using your wraths as just ways to clear the board, and it's important for that to be flat instant speed for Ifara's sake. Mm-hmm. But in general, the fact that we don't care that much what our wraths do speaks to what a wrath does in a deck, right? I will run 2 wraths per deck on average, and I'm fine with that. Because I don't care, like if I need it and I have it, great. I don't really care what it else does. Like I'll pick the one that helps the deck's theme, of course. But if it costs 5, fine. Instant speed, don't care, don't need it. Like I'll run Route. My favorite is End Hostilities, because you can often nab a couple pieces of equipment with it, right? Maybe some Lightning Greaves or some Swiftfoot Boots, which makes future spot removal even stronger.
Yeah, and the knock against that is, again, that you're hitting your own stuff. But I agree. But you get to choose when. It's just like anything. You get to choose when you play it. So, yeah. I'm with you. I actually think End Hostility is a bit underrated. But anyways, there you go. There you have it. That's that's the talk, right? That's
Yeah.
what you're looking at. Speed, the speed at which you do these things is so key. And just because you're getting so much value off these wraths, it seems like sorcery speed is totally fine. I don't think necessarily it's even really worth the extra mana to be playing these instant speed wraths in most cases.
Right.
Cyclonic Rift, very important exception to that.
Yes.
It's just so good. Okay, well, yeah, there you go. That's the vlog for this week. Thanks for watching this one. And yeah, again, smash that subscribe button if you're watching this on YouTube. And otherwise, we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Big thanks to all our patrons who make these episodes possible.
Yeah, and if you want to check out more comedy videos, check out our Brews News playlist.
Make sure you follow us on Twitch TV to see when we play live.
If you want to chat with us, head over to Twitter. We're at Commanders Brew.
And please hit subscribe to ding the bell and find out when we got new stuff coming out.
See you next time.
Bye.